Hey guys, this is Camite here. Today we're going to talk about raid encounter design. These are mostly going to be free form videos, just essentially shower thoughts put into a video format. Okay, so we're going to focus on how raid encounters are designed and what the designers do to increase and decrease complexity of the encounter. Think of it like a puzzle. The more you understand the pieces of the puzzle, the easier it becomes to solve the puzzle. And a raid is basically, or an encounter is basically a complex puzzle. And the more you understand how the puzzle is made, the easier it becomes to really unravel it and make efficient prog. A lot of this stuff will seem fairly obvious, but I've seen people get a lot of this stuff wrong, so we're just going to go through it and hopefully it just helps us get through, in this case, Sanctum a lot faster. Okay, right off the bat, what seems to be the most obvious thing is for the entire raid, each individual raider to not die. Seems obvious, don't die. Yep, yeah, just don't die. Pretty simple. Except it's not. One of the biggest barriers to prog on any encounter is people dying to avoidable damage or people dying when they could have done something to prevent their death. Even before we get into the actual mechanics themselves, avoidable deaths are the biggest cause of slow prog, biggest cause of frustration in any raid night is deaths which could have been prevented. What's happening behind us, guys, the video is totally irrelevant. It's just the video of the guild doing freaking SLG prog. Okay, if we talk about mechanics, a few phrases or a few acronyms which I find people get confused with. PB AoE, it's basically point blank AoE. Generally, when we talk about PB AoEs, we're talking about a mechanic that's centered around the boss model or the model of the mob. So what you're seeing here, for example, if the Goliath had a big circle around him, that would be a point blank AoE around the Goliath. DR is damage reduction. DR, surprisingly, all classes, all specs have some form of DR. It might be news to some of us. We actually have damage reduction on all the classes. When I say toolkit, the toolkit is the stuff that you do that is not part of your regular rotation. Yes, the other stuff, the other keys in your spellbook or the other buttons in your spellbook. Movement abilities. This is big, guys. Use your movement abilities a lot more. Anytime you have to move, you should ideally be using a movement ability. This is one example. There's stuff like Innervate, Touch of Karma, Manatide. Basically, utility that's not part of your VCAR setup. Okay. Cleave just stands for any mechanic that could hit multiple people at the same time. It's considered a cleave. It's generally done by the boss or an ad. Ooh is out of range. A lot of times, I find hunters are the worst for this. They'll stand way out of range of healers, and healers have to actually move around or individually heal them. This also applies to not stacking. If at any point there's nothing going on and there's no reason for you to be away from the raid group, you should always be stacked. Out of range is not just beyond maximum range. Out of range is also, why are you out of range of AoE heals, right? Anytime a healer has to specifically target you and you're not the tank for mechanic, you're doing it wrong, okay? You gotta fix it. Anytime the healers go below 10%, the only people who can really help this are the druids. And this goes back to our damage reduction. Okay, let's talk about the mechanics themselves. So almost every single mechanic since the beginning of time in MMO raiding can be broken down into a few general stereotypes, okay? I'm just going to go through the stereotypes here. The first one is spread. Basically, a spread mechanic, either the entire raid spreads or specific players spread. We can look at an example of this. We're not going here. In this case, you can see Grizzle Shriekwing and Fat Boss. That was a targeted spread mechanic. So I'm just going to go back a few seconds there. That's basically echolocation is targeting the 3 players and they have to spread. Okay. Back here. Okay, a raid spread example would be the council fight when she does the soul suck ability and everybody has to, the entire raid basically has to spread. Stack could be anything. Stack could be you're splitting raid damage. Stack could be there's a stack mechanic. Stack could be you just stacking for healing. Okay, that's your stacking. It's all the bait. There's a lot of baiting happening in modern WoW raids. Is you bait a particular mechanic in a particular spot, so you could stack for that. This is a big one. One of the most common ways raid designers make you do stuff is area denial. Area denial stands for any time that a part of the arena is covered in bad stuff, okay, or stuff that will hurt. This can be temporary, it can be permanent, okay. What you're seeing behind, you can see the eruption circles on the back, the brown ones. Those are temporary area denial mechanics. The other one is forced movement. This is a bit more complex. Forced movement, we're not talking about mechanics that force you to move. We're talking about mechanics that forcibly take control away from your character. So for example, the Denathrius knockback. Fuck SLG. The winds on Stone Legion. The knockback and the chain from Sludge Fist. Artifacts of Zymox Annihilate, the big sword that goes into the middle of the arena and sucks everybody in. Forced movement mechanics are honestly what give complexity to a lot of the later encounters of any raid tier. You will not see forced movement mechanics early on in the tier, but as you get later and later in the raid tier, you'll see a lot of these forced movement mechanics. And in order to complicate the encounter, designers will stack up the forced movement and something else. In case of SLG, you can see they try to stack forced movement with area denial, stuff like that with the winds. Just forced movement makes the fight really complex. Distraction mechanics. This is basically everything else, or all the small stuff that encounters put into, or designers put into an encounter, which forces you to do something else and forces you to be distracted from pushing your buttons, okay? You got 3 or 4 buttons, you're pushing them, everything's great in the world, and suddenly you're targeted by what I like to call distraction mechanics, okay? These can include things like kick the condemns on Lady Nerva ads, for healers, dispel stuff, for the Artificer Zymox pods, you got to pick the 4 mages who are going to do the pods. The Huntsman, yeah, if you get selected for, you know, the big arrows on Huntsman, or the balls on Inerva, you got to go play with the balls, do it right. Soak the big meteor slamming down on Sludge Fist. That thing caused so many wipes, too many. But yeah, the distraction mechanics are really where the skill ceiling sits. If you find you're struggling with damage and you're doing your rotation properly, you're probably losing damage on the distraction mechanics. Okay, and we'll loop back around to that in a minute. Finally, every encounter has a gimmick. Okay, has a encounter gimmick which the designers try to create specific to the lore or the theme of the fight. Shriekwing has the lantern. Huntsman has the 3 dogs. Basically, it's an ad fight. You got Hungering with the soak mechanic. Like every encounter has a gimmick, and the faster you understand how to deal with the gimmick, the faster you make prog on any fight. And that right there is the key to progging an encounter efficiently, is figuring out the gimmick and understanding what the raid designers are expecting from the raid group in handling the gimmick of the fight. Tank mechanics, guys, nobody cares. Okay, just position the boss. That's it. Okay, push the boss. Make sure the boss doesn't cleave the raid. That's really all anybody cares about. Okay, incoming damage. There's 3 sources, or all incoming damage can be divided into 3 groups. One is your tank busters or your cleave, basically damage aimed at the tank. Again, nobody really cares. Just use the defensive, help your healers. The next is raid wide. This is where the healers need to talk about proper recovery from raid wide incoming damage. Raid wide incoming damage is not just the responsibility of the healers, okay? Everybody has to be involved with dealing with raid wide mechanics or raid wide damage. An example would be the jumps in Council of Blood, where you get 5 stacks, you jump and it does a raid wide. So it's a very fancy raid wide damage, and you basically have to work with the healers. One, the healers need to have a cooldown list or a sequence, and then the raid has to assist the healers by understanding when and when not to jump. The other one is targeted mechanics. Targeted mechanics, basically any damage source that can specifically target you. As you can see in the SLG fight or the Stone Legion fight behind, you see players getting targeted by the bleed. This is considered targeted incoming damage. You really can't do much about it, except if you can anticipate a high amount of targeted incoming damage. That's when I would use your class's DR, or your class's damage reduction ability. Okay. Now down to the meat and bones of this whole thing is what the mechanic is actually called does not matter, okay? Does not matter what the mechanic is. Depending on how your brain works, you look at a mechanic and you automatically want to assign the mechanic into one of these groups. That way you see it happen and you know what you have to do without having to go through a logical process. So you see mechanic go off, you see a big circle on Shriekwing, and you know that, oh, I got to move, I got to spread, I got to get out of there, and it's followed by the big red pool on the ground. What is the mechanic called? Honestly, it's called echolocation, but the only way I know it is because I had to Google the Shriekwing YouTube video. So the name of the mechanic is absolutely irrelevant, okay? What you want to do is you see the indicator go out, and in your head you want to know which of these mechanics is it. That's kind of what you want to do. And the faster you do that, the faster you're able to build that list in your head, the faster you can actually get through these encounters. Okay, what makes the fight complex? What makes the fight complex really is, I'm going to use the most famous phrase in the world, it is an overlap of multiple different mechanics. Early on in a tier, or early on in the phase of any given encounter, you will see there'll only be a spread. Like in Shriekwing, you only have echolocation. There'll only be a stack. For healing, you look at Shriekwing again. Big AoE damage, big raid wide goes out, and if you're stacked, then your healers can heal you. It's all good. Everybody's happy. Soon, they start happening at the same time. You start having echolocation, and then you start having the stack as well. Starts to increase the complexity. You get the area denial happening because people are putting the puddles in the corner of the room. So that's how encounters are designed. So you basically want to always be aware of which of these groupings are being overlapped. Now, talking about overlaps, be careful here. There's almost no mechanics designed in such a way that the overlap will kill the player, okay? There's exceptions to the rule, like anything else. But generally, overlaps won't be designed to kill the raider, okay? So you should always look at this and say, hey, this is what's happening right now. I'm being knocked back by Denathrius. I have to kill the ad. They're popping Lust. What can my class do to continue performing at an optimal level? Okay? And that's really what separates, the good players from the average, or even the best players from the good. So understanding which mechanics are being stacked and which mechanics are happening simultaneously. Generally, guys, the fights in the beginning of the tier, and you'll see it going into Sanctum, the first 5 or 6 fights are not simple, but they introduce you to the theme of the raid, and they introduce you to a lot of the mechanics and the complexity that you can expect from the tier. As you get toward the end of the tier, mechanics are going to start getting more complex. You're gonna start to see a lot more forced movement mechanics at the end of towards the end of the tier, the second half of the raid tier. And as I mentioned, anytime you have a forced movement mechanic, that right there is what is causing the complexity of the fight. Okay. So how to get better? How to deal with the mechanics once you know what the puzzle pieces are. So right, the first and foremost, guys, is stop any random unnecessary movement. Okay, believe me, it is driving your healers, your raid leaders, and your tanks absolutely nuts when you keep moving for no reason. Okay, the shuffle strafing thing that melee do, this constant left right movement, just stop. Just stop it, guys. Okay, just go to your room. Stop it. Same thing with the casters. I don't care if you're a druid with heart. That doesn't matter if you have instant cast spells. Stop any and all unnecessary movement. Okay, just causes a lot of confusion. It just makes the raid seem a lot more disorganized when you're running around constantly and without cause. Any movement that you do must be planned, must be for a reason. Okay, I'm getting targeted by a distraction mechanic. I gotta go place something somewhere. I'm going to move. I'm going to come back, and then I'm going to not move. Okay. This one is big. Is try to generalize the mechanics. So when there's 3 or 4 mechanics happening, try to understand. Okay, this is the spread. This is the stack. Without necessarily the raid leader having to call it out, and without you really having to read the name of the mechanic. You should just know, okay, we're spreading here, we're stacking here. Oh, big pool on the ground. Let's move away. Great. This one, a lot of raiders struggle with the council fight, mostly because of this reason. A lot of times, modern WoW encounters are designed with a lot of data. There's a lot of information coming your way. There's a lot of colors on the screen. There's just a lot of shit going on. Okay, there's a lot of shit going on. What you really need to do is you need to completely tune out and completely disregard any of the data that does not relate to you. Okay, there's stuff happening. Healers are doing something. There's somebody going and putting a spread mechanic somewhere in the corner of the room. Completely ignore them. You don't even need to look at them. The only time it matters is if you're assigned, or if because the mechanic itself you have to help somebody else. That is the only time it matters. Okay, just focus on doing your job the rest of the time. Zero in. Okay, I got to keep pushing my buttons in the proper order. Okay, this one I've seen a lot of raiders run to stuff. Okay, just they book it. There's a mage. I saw a mage with shimmer and a pug. This guy had 2 blinks or something, and walked to the edge of the room to drop down the puddle, the echolocation, and then walked back. Like, no, but just use your movement, plan for it. Don't burn your movement CDs without cause. Don't be a death knight. Okay, that's big. Don't be a death knight. But yes, have a plan for every mechanic. Use your toolkit here. Okay, we talked about use your toolkit, use your movement abilities, use your transcendences, your warlock gates, use your door of shadows, use your whatever you've got, so you don't have to walk places. Use your movement. For tanks, yeah, guys, don't die. Okay. DPS. This one's big, guys. Use your mitigation. Okay, this right here, damage reduction and mitigation are the same thing. Use it when you can predict a lot of incoming damage. Okay, this is going back to our don't die. Okay, if it's in prog, min eye level, raid busters hurt, or raid wide damage sources really hurt. A lot of the targeted stuff hurts even harder. So understand which of the mechanics are targeted mechanics, and understand that, oh, I should probably save my 1 minute, 1.5 minute, one of these defensive cooldowns for incoming damage. This here is the big skill ceiling here. This combines with the distraction mechanics, okay? You want to shoot for 0. I've got downtown here. Okay, hold on. That's got to change. Okay, there we go. Downtime. Okay. What that means is your GCD should always be spinning. You want to always keep your GCD spinning. Aim for 0 downtime. If there's a distraction mechanic happening and you're targeted by it, have a plan. Okay, look at your DBM timers and say, okay, in 5 seconds, there's Streak Wings echolocation about to happen. What do I have in my toolkit if I get targeted by echolocation? So have a plan for that. Don't get surprised. Oh, I have echolocation. Oh, shit. Now I'm gonna press D and I'm a caster and I won't cast for 10 seconds while I go and put this puddle on the ground. 0 downtime, guys. That's honestly the name of the game. If you can minimize downtime combined with don't die, you will be you'll be amongst the best raiders on NA Storm Rage. I'm just kidding. You'll be a good raider, okay? No downtime and don't die. This way you can use Spirit Walker if you're a shaman. Keep it on CD. This one is big. Just no downtime. You can really get 0 downtime if you understand the pieces of the puzzle. Okay. Talent tree, guys. This is big. A lot of people will go into especially mythic raiding, and like they'll be using Wowhead guides or whatever, icy veins, whoever your source is, your grandfather, neighbor next door, whoever. That's a bit tricky because you should use the guides to get better. However, don't follow cookie cutter guides blindly. Always try and understand why the people who have written the guide have advised you to use those talents or those legendaries or that particular stat priority. You gotta make sure you understand all the talents your class can use. Time your windows. So generally you'll have an idea of how long the fight is. It's a 6-minute fight. Okay, if you use your cooldowns, DPS cooldowns on the opener. If you have 3-minute class, in a 6-minute fight, you can use it. More than likely, you can use it twice, 2 more times. So you can use an opener, 3 minutes, and then again 3 minutes. When I be lusting, if lust is happening in 20 seconds, and your 3-minute is up, don't just use the 3-minute before lust. Wait for lust and then pop your 3-minute. Unless you lose a cast over the course of the fight, okay? So this one's really big. If you need to use a cooldown in order to not lose the use of the cooldown through the course of the fight, do it. Otherwise, wait for lust. So, cooldown windows, okay? Don't just push the button because the thing comes off cooldown. Sure, early tier, beginning tier heroic encounters, that would probably work. You just push the button when it's off CD, and you should be okay theoretically. But generally, as you get into more complex encounters that have specific burst window, that have requirements, now you want to start timing your CDs. When you go to pot and stuff, there's no pre-potting anymore. Did you bribe the priest yet? Stuff like that. For healers, talk to your other healers. The biggest downfall of any raid group during prog, aside from people dying, is the healers not talking to each other and not communicating what's going on. Who has what, where. Generally, you have one person calling out which healing CDs are being used, but everybody needs to contribute, okay? If you think something is being used, but something else could be better, say something after the pull is done. Say, hey man, maybe we shouldn't have used Aura Mastery there. Maybe we should cover it with something else. Maybe we should Spirit Link that and use Aura Mastery somewhere else. This one here drives your raid leaders crazy. Absolutely nuts, okay? Like, cuckoo, batshit, tear your hair out, go Asmon Gold Ball, nuts. Is healers, I understand Mythic Plus. I get it. You want to save your mana. Awesome. Do not end prog encounters with a full or high mana bar and people are dying to slow or gradual damage. If somebody dies to a one shot, there's nothing you could have done. But if somebody's half health, taking damage, and you're out there casting a mana efficient spell because you're trying to save your mana during a prog night, guys, no. Just stop, okay? Stop it. Like if we say here, fuck your mana, okay? As people get more comfortable with the fight, as the players start using their mitigations better, as the players stop getting hit by avoidable damage, you'll see that your mana will automatically start getting better towards the end of the encounter. Okay, so during prog healers, it is absolutely critical that you do everything possible to keep the raid alive. Okay, if you run out of mana and the boss is at 40%, but you kept everybody alive without doing 80% overhealing, no big deal. We'll die to damage. We'll die to the healers going and we'll figure out, okay, let's start reducing damage or maybe take the load off you. This one's touchy, okay? I don't want all 5 of our healers to quit the game, okay? When you can, and there's nothing going on, when nobody's dying, just put a dot on the boss or cast a damaging spell, okay? Use a smite, use a flame shock, okay? Just hit the boss with something that hurts, okay? Use your free GCDs. And this is one thing that I probably should have added here is lethal damage, okay? Understand the difference between a player that is low but will live versus a player that is low and is going to die. I see a lot of players, a lot of healers targeting somebody who's at 90% health as opposed to targeting somebody who's at 40% health. If there's a damage event about to happen, remember, the person with the lower health bar is probably the one going to die. So understand what is lethal damage, and when a player is just below 100% health. Your goal as a healer is not to keep everybody at full health all the time. Your goal as a healer is to make sure that nobody takes lethal damage. Okay, that is the goal, and it's a very subtle difference. It's a pretty big difference. Okay, that's really it, guys. If you see anything that should be added on, mention it in Discord. You can even put it in the comments here. This video is really for our guild for the most part. This is how I sort of organize the raid mechanics in my head, and this is sort of what I will be using throughout Sanctum as well to explain the strategy for a lot of the mechanics. Okay. To try to understand how the puzzle is really built. It's basically built with, the designers will pick how complex do we want this fight. We want this fight really complex. So toward the end, you have all these mechanics happening, essentially simultaneously. Designers could be, no, we don't want this fight too complex. It's mid-tier. Maybe let's put 3 at the same time or 2 at the same time. One of the mechanics we didn't add here was ads. It's just ads, guys. You pull it. Sometimes the ads have their own mechanic from this list. For the most part, it's an ad. Just it's an ad phase. You cleave it down. Everything's good. Okay. I'll be publishing a playlist of all the heroic strats here sometime tomorrow. So as we go through Sanctum, make sure you watch those and try and understand even before we get to the fight. Awesome. Thanks, guys. See ya.